Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media for writers by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, president of Winding Trails Media, author of Crazy Things, and also president of St. Louis Writers Guild. And with me today is my beautiful co-host,
Kathleen Kayembe. I write paranormal romance under the pen name Kaseket and Vita, and I am going to be gone after this episode for a number of weeks.
Well, but why are you leaving us?
Oh, I'm going to Clarion. It's in San Diego. It's a writing workshop for sci-fi, fantasy, and horror writers. You learn how to write short stories at the feet of people who are doing it professionally and doing very well.
She's going to be taking lots of notes and sharing, I'm sure.
Oh my goodness. You
okay.
guys,
so informative when you come back.
And with us also is...
I'm Brad R. Cook. I'm the author of many a novel. No, actually just a couple of them. Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu. Later this year you can grab Iron Lotus. And my short story, A Clockwork Heart, is out there as well. Do check them out at bradarcook.com. Plus, you can find me at St. Louis Writers Guild in July doing a POV workshop. You can find me at the Big River Steampunk Festival in August and at Archon come this October.
In fact,
plus other places probably too.
As far as the river one, we both should be at that one with luck.
Yes.
With what?
With swords.
And swords. Swinging at each other again. Mel?
Okay. I'm Melanie Planey, author of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My first self-published novel should be coming out next year. It's called Threadcaster. Check it out. I've been editing it like a fiend. It's now been probably a fourth of the way completely rewritten, so hopefully it's good.
And today we're going to talk about dealing with our demon through our writing and so forth. So dealing with our demons. I'm not talking about calling forth through black magic some fantastical evil that comes powering out of the ground.
Wait, no, I'm leaving now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, get Buffy Vampire Slayer in here now.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness. And then they took out Brad's intro.
Yes. Okay. No, I'm talking about the demons that we face as we go through life and how they get into our stories. Sometimes writing can be therapeutic with what we write about. I'm going to borrow, before this episode and off mic, when we were trying to define this episode, Jennifer talked about Stephen King. Stephen King, if you don't know, had a bout of alcoholism and drug addiction and so forth. And I say bout, you never get away from it, even if you stopped using the
He suffered from alcoholism and cocaine and opiates and all those things.
And I
Probably
really think
had a great life. Let's just say.
yeah.
You can read all about it in his book on writing.
Yes. You can
He got
also
hit by a car once.
yeah. You can also read about how this pops into as a demon in his stories with especially misery. That nurse was his drug addiction made manifest.
Interestingly, that was written before his car accident.
Yes.
And Cujo, he does not remember writing
Nope.
because he was writing it while he was trying to kick drugs, wasn't he? He was trying to.
Well, I thought he was just completely stoned out of his
Was
head.
he just so? Was it while he? Was it the one he wrote before he decided to solve his problem? The point
Yes.
is that it's completely erased from his memory.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was that movie, that one, or another one. He went to a movie. It's like, it's a pretty good
Cujo.
movie. Yeah. He went to a movie, saw the movie. He's like, oh, that's a good movie. Who wrote it? It's like, you did. Really?
Oh, no wonder I liked it so much.
Yeah. So how do you?
If we could all only write that well, we were that messed up.
Well, okay.
It shows his genius.
It does. It really does. And while I personally may not be a super Stephen King fan, I have to admire that he is able to face his demons in his writing the way he does. Personally, picking at the scabs of those personal demons tends to make me want to shy away from them. Makes me want to go, oh, life is good, we'll be fluffy with our writing, which is the last thing I ever do, but still.
I was gonna say, you? Fluff?
Yeah, me? No.
You wrote about a cat once, I recall.
Huh?
You wrote about a cat once.
Skittles.
Yeah, this is true. Skills. I do need to bring him back as an audio play. Hint, hint, that is eventually going to happen.
Eventually.
Yeah, I've got
You only do so many things in a day.
Yes, I do. And I've got a new one, but we're not going to talk about that. Till I can get this one I'm working on done first. So, but anyway, that was a complete roundabout.
I believe we found one of your demons.
Yes. Yeah. So what are some ways you face your demons when you write? Kathleen, you started with your hand up. Did you want to go?
There's a story that I haven't finished writing that came about because I knew something wasn't right in my head. Like, I knew that my grasp of the English language and of grammar and of words, like knowing specific words, something was wrong with it. It's something I've since found out has happened to other people with ADD, where it's like you're losing your ability to use language.
Oh, wow.
It's leaving you, and other people can't tell, but you can tell you're impaired, and it's awful.
Wow.
So I didn't know it was happening to me at the time, so I started writing a story of a young man who has that start to happen to him, and he doesn't know what it is. In the story, he's becoming an empath, and he will lose the ability to use all language soon. But like, it was terrifying, and that's kind of how I dealt with it before I ever found out that it was related to anything. Before I found out what it was, and that it would pass. So for me, I've always thought that if something scares you, you should write about it. Whether or not people believe me, I've had demonic experiences, and they're terrifying. And one of the reasons I have demons in my book is because I was trying to deal with that level of fear and having to function as a normal human being when your lizard brain has been in charge for way longer than is healthy for you.
Speaking of this, and we were talking about Stephen King, it seems like a lot of people write about their demons using metaphors because, misery.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Misery was about drug addiction. I don't think drug addiction actually literally came out in that book.
No, it's not just about using it's about telling a story that you want to tell and get out there, but, beyond the Curse of the Golden Arm, I think it is the great book / movie Frank Sinatra did about heroin addiction. One of the great books about addiction. However, the story of addiction, or like what Stephen King loves to do, is by taking the themes of that and then weaving it into something else, so you almost don't know you're reading a story about addiction
Right.
or demons or something along those lines. That's a wonderful thing to do. I myself write for kids, so I will admit that I often do not include many demons within that writing.
That you know about?
Well, no, so the one that everyone loves to throw at me is, oh, do you have problems with your dad? Which I do, but they're actually completely separate, from the issues that come up with Alexander and his dad, or with Genevieve and her dad.
Completely different issues.
Yeah, completely different issues. Am I writing about it Actually, I'm not. I'm writing because the character needed to have issues with their parents, and I like removing children from their parents and giving them their own adventures. So that's why I write that.
In
It's
fiction.
absolutely, yes, in fiction. Well, in fiction. We're okay with it. But, I'm not actually writing about my own personal demons, which is kind of, something I've often been asked by people who know me and read those books. However, to throw out there, my personal biggest demon is my own crippling self-doubt. Even though I have 2 books out, even though I have short stories, even though I was president of St. Louis Writers Guild, I'm a blogger, I've written for businesses, I've been almost a professional writer now for a decade or more, and yet I still have crippling self-doubt that I suck as a writer and will never achieve any actual level of success.
You and Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the only one. This is a
No, I
common
mean, like,
thread.
you're in good company.
Yeah, but that is like my biggest demon personally that I have to overcome every time I sit down in front of the computer.
If this is not so much a demon, but just a reoccurring concept. I've just since this is a therapy session in addition, I've never had a serious romantic partner. I've dated guys before, but I've never been in that sort of classic high school romance that you see in so much media. So I've always had a hard time relating to those stories, and as a result, a lot of the books that I write are about strong familial or platonic relationships that maybe turn into a romance. I have one couple that fell in love without me asking them to. I was writing them as friends, and then before I knew it, they all wanted to kiss each other. I'm like, okay, if you insist. But that's a theme and a reoccurring thing I've noticed is that I'm working through the issue of me trying to find fulfilling relationships in friends and family when I don't have that sort of, I hate to say generic. I'm not saying that falling in love isn't an important part of people's lives. It certainly is. But it's not something that I can directly identify with. And when I'm watching a romance, I don't like romance movies very much because it all feels like I'm looking at somebody else's story.
Well, yeah, the whole instant attraction thing is something that I imagine a lot more people want it to be true than is true for them.
Yeah.
It does happen, though.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen.
So I thought you were going to go.
That's not a demon.
No, I don't know. It depends on who you end up falling in love with.
Nope.
To the
What's the
instant
demon?
attraction. It was for
I
me.
do want to share a quote, though, that I found way back when and that I hadn't thought about in years, but I put it up on my bio on a website years and years ago, like when I was in high school years ago, and I still find it true. Kate Green says, if you want to write, you have to be willing to be disturbed. And I still hold to that. One of the things that I think is, well, no, I don't think it's true. I know it's true. People who journal about their day-to-day lives and experiences, and who record their feelings as well as the events, are better adjusted at the end of the day than people who don't.
That
like-
says a lot about me. Go ahead.
Writing, I firmly believe writing can save your life. But one of the ways it can best do that is, whether you show this to anyone or not, you being willing to write out how you feel about things will help you process better and will help you go about your daily life better. There have been times at work when I've gone to my car to sit there for break, and I've gotten out a notebook and started writing, and I didn't even know I was tense until I started writing, and then I just relaxed. And I went back into work and I was fine. It was like I didn't realize I was mad at people, but apparently I was, and now I'm good. I can just be a person. I feel like when you're writing about your demons, it doesn't necessarily have to be for other people, for the public. You know, it doesn't have to be in a story necessarily. It can just be journaling or something for yourself. So I think we should go into that as well as writing about your demons and using them for stories.
So, writing for therapy?
Yeah, writing for therapy. Because, I mean, we're all told to write what we know, so in some fashion we're always doing that. But I think this topic is maybe more specific to things that disturb us about our lives or pasts, maybe?
Well,
Can be.
it
It
can
depends the direction we're going. So far, we've been very honest with our listenership about things that inspire our writing or perhaps start our writing. Like the stories that knit together inside our brains are all things that we are thinking about anyway.
I think sometimes, though, especially when you're writing about your demons, you don't even realize that's what you're doing at first. It's when you go back and are doing the editing, or when someone else points it out to you. I think that's probably the best case. It's like, oh, yes, this is about you working out your relationship with your ex-wife. Okay. It's like, it is? Oh.
I remember I was in college and I was putting together a portfolio to join a short story writing class. And I showed the stories to my mom that I was going to use because they were my best. And she read them And her first comments were not about how the stories were themselves, things I could fix, things you want people to critique you for. She says, these stories are all about violation. Are you okay? Did something happen to you that you can tell me? And I was like, no. No, they're just stories. But apparently I must have been working through something in my head that maybe felt like a violation. I don't know. And it came out in these stories. So, Brad, as much as you say the father-son relationship in your stories is not related to yours, I think in some ways you probably draw from some of the emotions you feel in that relationship.
Quite possibly. But the point is that my point is that what I have my characters going through is not actually directly related to what I feel.
Okay.
Because you want to talk for an entire hour, we can, about my feelings about parental units, but
Call them units,
what,
of course.
what I'm injecting into the book is not that.
Okay.
Like they're very separate, which is funny when people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, now I will admit that I don't actually use the word dad in my books. I use the word father, and that's very much done on purpose. My editors are always trying to insert dad." And I'm like, nah, let's put father back in.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that is probably like where my own personal stuff would fall in and slip in. But the reality is the actual like things that I feel are not what I touch on.
Oh, okay. Well, no, that kind of answers my question.
Yeah.
Would you consider touching on them at a future date? Like, is that something that you might use in a story somewhere? Maybe not appropriate for your YA.
I've already worked through it. So for me, it's something that like, I've already dealt with. I had to deal with it back in high school. So like, me with my issues with my parents and stuff, I've already worked through. I don't need to work through them with writing. However, one of the themes of the book of Iron Horseman is classism and the ability of people telling you no, you can't do that. And I'll fully admit that that's me working through that. That kind of that notion of, being told things you can't do and wanting to do. So yeah, for that kind of stuff, it's totally in there and is coming from a place within me. But I've already worked through my parental stuff.
I have a question.
That's the
for
reason I can
next.
throw it out and talk about it.
For later than this, you brought up a good point.
A slightly different topic, but also dealing with parental units. Carol Hobson Burnett, she's the author of The Secret Garden and Little Princess, has definite mother issues. And if you read enough of her stories, especially if you read them in close proximity, you realize mothers are either terrible people, absent completely, or this wonderful personified perfection that could never really exist in real life. She obviously didn't have, well, not obviously, but I would predict she didn't have a very good relationship with her mother. And I suspect her mother was either neglectful or absent.
I'll say it's kind of common for what we're writing. It's hard if what we're writing is a part of ourselves, even if it's nothing, the story has nothing to do with us. It's hard not to put our challenges in life, shall we say, our demons into it. There will be a story coming out that I'll be doing an audio drama of. It's already rough drafted. Rough drafted. I've written this as a short story before, but it's a story about the angel of death, and it really came out of an ex-girlfriend, sorry Melly, an ex-girlfriend who had been told she had 5 years to live. After my father had already just passed away from complications related to leukemia, and the year my father passed away, my karate instructor, who was 26 at the time, died 3 days after my dad died, and those were the first two of over 100 funerals in less than a year that I ended up going to. I have a lot of trouble today going to a cemetery for obvious reasons. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was just going to say, and not to diminish what you were just talking about, because that's actually kind of sucks. I'm sorry.
It is what it is.
One of the first stories I ever wrote, I turned into Archon for a short story contest there. And I thought it was this really hard-hitting piece on man versus beast and everything like that. And I thought I'd written this really awesome piece, but one of the judges turned to me and he goes, "It's really like ultra violent." And he's like, "The conflict resolution is completely ultra violent." And I was like, I hadn't really thought of it that way before. Going back through some of my early writings, there's a lot of like resolution through violence, which I kind of realized was either me not being super violent, I'm not, but actually more of, I think, kind of using a simple technique in writing. If you kill everybody and then at the end there's only one guy left, they're the hero of the story, kind of a deal. So, it was kind of working through things like that, but it was something that I hadn't actually seen in my writing that came out. Gloriously, he compared the character to Captain Kirk. He's like, this is a Captain Kirk story. And I was like, I hadn't actually thought of that before. But I think your writing can surprise you sometimes. And I think a lot of times is, it's something you won't spot. It's something other people are going to bring up to you.
I think you had your hand up a moment ago.
I did. I think we can maybe expand this to expand the use of the word demons to be things that we have dealt with in the past too.
Oh yeah.
Because you don't necessarily have to write through something for it to fuel a story or to come into a story later.
A lot of people's memoirs are all full of that type of stuff.
Like there are things that I've dealt with that I'll still use in my stories because I remember how I felt in those situations. And I feel like I can more accurately write a character in a similar situation because I've lived through that. Like, it's not necessarily something that I currently wrestle with, but the fact that I've done that means it's now something I can draw from.
Not something I've done personally, but a book that I read, it's going to be published later this year. It's already come out, I'm not certain which. It's called The Poison Tree. And it's written by a WashU professor who was writing about the best coming of age tale, or I should say a son dealing with his father tale that I've ever read. His father was this very demonstrative man who kind of, did some really horrible things to the family. He was was an exec for one of the big powerful New York firms, and was not a nice guy. And through the memoir that he writes, you get an explanation of it. You get a kind of a dealing as this, as he grows older and deals with his own children and kind of thing. It is a wonderful, wonderful tale. I highly recommend it. But I've met everyone in this story. So for me, it was the most intriguing thing in the world because, I remember I went up to New York with he was a friend of mine from high school's family, and I met this man, and he was larger than life and crazy and kind of weird and, not the greatest guy you wanted to hang around, but I didn't kind of get some of the craziness that was going on. And the way he treated his grandchildren was, never good, and the way he treated his son was never good, but, it is something that you can draw on. Because this isn't him writing through this. He'd obviously come to grips with this through, years and years and decades. But wrote a wonderful book that is, like I said, the best son dealing with a father story I've ever read. So, it is something you can kind of come back to, pull from, I should say.
What's the author's name?
It's Henry Chevet.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a drama teacher or drama professor at WashU. But it's called The Poison Tree. It's an excellent, excellent book.
Let me ask a question. Kathleen kind of hit on this, and I'm just kind of curious. Going around the room, we talked about journaling, and we talked about writing our demons in fiction. Am I the only one in this room who does not journal?
Oh, I don't journal. At least not currently.
I no longer journal.
Okay.
My journal's in my bag.
Okay.
Mine too.
I believe in journal.
I free write. I don't journal the way Jennifer does, although I wish I did because I like the way you do it.
Well, then leave a whole lot of blank pages with dates at the top, and you've got it.
Like what I do is I free write, It's basically I do morning pages. Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way advocates doing morning pages. Every morning when you get up, write 3 pages of longhand, front and back or 2 pages. I don't do it in the mornings. I do it whenever I need to. And I do it sometimes when I don't think I need to, and it's really helpful for me.
Jen, you journal as well?
I journal, yes. My journaling is more. I started journaling really my junior year of high school, which it had so happened that was also I was journaling through 9/11, like the actual event. So that was the first year I just so happened to have 2 school planners. You know, they give you your school planner when you go to high school, and they're like, okay, here's the planner that you need to use. Nowadays, they probably have iPads, but we had paper ones that were spiral bound.
They still do paper.
That's good, I'm glad. So I just happened to have 2. Instead of giving one back, I said, okay, this one's for my schoolwork, and then this one's for the stuff that happens. So I took every day of my day planner, and I wrote down what happened to me in my life. Funny jokes I heard, stuff that people were doing. Today was such and such's birthday. I had to wait for so long for the bus today. Oh my gosh, I can't wait till I can drive. That kind of thing. And that was where that started. And that was fun. I took a break for senior year because it was just because I had an extra journal. But in that senior year, I realized that so much happened to me, and I remembered none of it. Like, it was just gone. Because it wasn't important enough a year later for me to recall it. But my junior year journal, including that 9/11 day where I just wrote down how everyone was reacting, it was very interesting to see that unfold. It took up way long, wider than everyone else did. I also did a drawing every day in the journal, which was another habit that I've kept up. But that when I started college, I said, okay, I'm going to buy a real book. I'm going to date it, and I'm going to write down all kinds, anything that I think was important for whatever day. And sometimes that is just, I went to class, and then I went home and studied, and that was all I did that day, and that's all it's listed on that day. Some days, some weeks or whatever are so busy that I forget to fill it in, and Monday and Tuesday are left blank because I could not recall anything important enough to write down. So they're just left blank. Whatever happened those days, I didn't write it down that day. It's gone now. But I remember that on Wednesday I met this person when we had a good lunch. And I remember that on Thursday we met at Caldy's and we wrote, and that was the day that, such and such member of the group brought this thing, and that was funny. This kind of, we were talking, today we were hanging out at the Caldy's table, and for whatever reason, Amy got in her head to look up Uranus, Missouri, and we made fun of Uranus, Missouri for about 3 hours instead of writing. Which, by the way, go to their website. It's pretty funny. They're in on their own joke. So journaling started off with just me trying to hold on to what I was losing, and it soon also became a basket to catch story ideas, to catch lists, phone numbers. I take it with me to client meetings and make notes in it, and it's just my life book. I have a big shelf of them at home, and someday my grandkids are going to open it up and say, what language is this written in? Because you can't read any of it. But I'll make a very interesting post-mortem biography, because I'm not turning those into a story. They're not meant to become a memoir someday. They're just vehicles through which I've been able to kind of set my life down. I find that I feel very stable knowing that all the things that I'm doing and all the struggles that I've met, that those are kept somewhere. I don't have to carry them in me. They're in the book, and the book is on the shelf. I had an episode in my college life where everyone has a crazy roommate. My roommate flipped out on me, like, catastrophically. And it was the first time I've ever been stabbed in the back by anybody. And I just had to,
Just
I
to
cried
clarify, was this literal or figurative?
No, it was figurative.
Okay, just making sure.
Well, anyway, I wrote it all down, and it was good to go back and, after I've gotten through that stuff, to look down and see how I struggled with it, and then, you don't feel that way anymore. You feel different now. It doesn't hurt as bad as it did back then. And you can look back at it and say, that thing that she did, it hurt you at the time, but really in the broad scheme of things, look how it affected your life. Like, your life continued. Things continued all right. That was one event, and now you've grown from it. and you can see all the ways you've grown. And even better, going back to the previous year, that when I knew that roommate as a friend before I was roommates with her, I could see all the fun stuff we did together. It's like, you had a friendship. It's okay to feel betrayed, because look at all the fun stuff. This wasn't there the whole time. It was a nice thing for me to have. I was glad I had it in that episode.
This actually brings up a good reason to journal, but it also varies something interesting about memory. Let's see, to anonymize something, because this isn't about me, so I can't talk about it don't want to expose anybody, but there was a blended family. So there were two brothers, stepbrothers, but they were the same age, so they'd be in the house at the same time. And one brother, when he grew up, had some major issues with his stepmother. Well, then he was complaining about it and talking to his stepbrothers like, you have things that you're saying that you're mad about, but I was in the house. I don't remember that. And, I just happened to think in retrospect, if one or both of them had kept a journal, even if it was the person that was remembering things wrong, whoever that was, they could go back and look at their own words and like, wait a minute, if this really happened, wouldn't I have written about it? Because wouldn't it have been important to you?
I was going to say, I do not journal. Probably the closest I come to journaling, which is the reason why I don't do anything with this writing, is my poetry. My poetry, when I write it, what I share with the public of poetry is, call it the shavings on the tip of the iceberg. But what I don't share, it's very personal memories of situations that I cannot go into, and I can't journal, for various reasons.
Well,
I appreciate you doing it too.
Everyone has their coping mechanism,
Yes.
Yeah.
Not everybody can draw a picture every day. There are lots of times when I've needed a hug real bad, so I draw one, and it feels like one. That helps. Not everyone can do that, and I'm sad that you can't do that, but maybe you needed to write your hug
I
instead.
cannot draw.
Well, that's
Can't
what
draw
stick
either.
figures are for.
I can't draw stick
I
figures.
don't know if a
Yeah.
stick figure hug would do the same thing. Depends on how much emotion you put into it, I guess.
Yeah. It just kind of is that bent elbow thing.
Yeah.
Lines crossing on a page.
You see, people have elbows, it just ruins everything.
So, have you ever gone back to, I'm talking to the two people who journal, go back to your journals for story fodder?
Actually that's false. Because I do put story ideas in my journals, and sometimes I'll mark the pages. If I'm being nice to myself in the future, I'll mark the pages.
Mhm.
Usually I'm not. So I'll go back and look through and see what ideas I had that I can transcribe somewhere else, where I would probably then have to find them. I have a great system. Let me just say, it was on my other computer. Two computers back. So I'll go back and look very, very, very occasionally. I can think of maybe a handful of times I've done it. But for the most part, when I put a notebook away, it's dead to me. No, it's done. It's done, and it's more trouble than it's worth going and finding it and getting it out. I will say, though, there are some notebooks that I don't touch. My memory of what's in them is more than enough. I don't want to know how I felt from my own fingers, because I don't want to go back. So there are some things that I've worked through them, but you don't tempt anything. There are things, I feel like there's dealing with your demons through writing, and that's good, but there's also being smart about it. And so some writing I will, exercise everything from myself like it is a demon, and then I will let it go stay where it is. Brad, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I have a really good memory. And I have it for reasons, but, one of the things I do in my writing is I often reach back to either incidences that I've lived through, stories I've heard, things that I felt at certain times, and I will use that directly, indirectly, however it ends up coming across. I don't journal, but that doesn't mean that I don't constantly think about my life the way that you do when you journal. part of the reason I don't journal is I learned a long time ago that you don't write anything down you don't want others to read.
Yep.
So because of that, things can be used against you if you write it down. So I don't necessarily always write things down, but that doesn't mean that I don't constantly think about them. I mean, I'm a night owl, so I spend most of my nights up thinking about stuff. Anyone who follows my Twitter knows that I love to watch movies late at night. But yeah, so, but I will take that, and the other thing I do is when I get a story idea, I will write it down, much in the way you're doing with your journals. And I will write up a whole series of notes. I might come back 6 months later and write more notes on it because I've thought about it more. And usually those will end up turning into something. I also have a huge stack of to be written.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah, I don't understand people that say, I don't know what to write. How would you write fiction? I don't know what I'd write about.
Don't say that, because someday that'll be you. That always happens to me when I say I don't understand this. I'm probably going to end up being like a pedophile junkie who goes to prison for like I don't know what.
Let's hope not.
But you knew me when, guys. I was a good person way back
Yeah.
before I became everything I didn't understand.
But yeah, so I think that we all would do that though. I think we all draw from our lives.
Almost certainly.
I used to have that issue where I wouldn't write certain things down because to protect the innocent that was me. And then I graduated from school and I had my own place and I could lock the friggin' door and I was like, it is on now.
Yeah.
Oh, and I surrounded myself with amazing people. Like, that's part of the problem. That was part of my problem initially. I couldn't control who I was around. So once I could, I was like, you're safe now. Write all the friggin' names down I want.
Well, no, there's also the whole issue of if something's on a computer, it's statistically more likely to get out to the world than if it's in your handwriting that's very hard to read.
That's true.
Well, I don't know. I also find that I write differently on a computer than
That's
I do
true,
by
too.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted
I
to,
spell much better on a computer.
Oh yeah.
except when spell check autocorrects things into something wrong. No,
Okay.
I did not mean shirt. I did not mean shirt. Friggin' why the shirt are
Fine.
you doing this?
Fine, whatever the shirt.
Yes.
Why the ducking shirt?
There you go.
Oh my goodness, yes. I wanted to. Do you want to branch into things that we common themes we have in our writing? Because
We should.
I feel like in some
I
ways
feel
that's
light in the mood a
also.
little, come into
Like, there are also
writing
things that we're
demons.
wrestling with. Like, you talked about class struggles, and
Yeah.
that's something that you write about more, like, often.
Every
And
book I
it's
write has
something-
an ism. I like isms. So I try and insert isms into my book. One, because I write adventure stories. I'll fully admit that I write popcorn novels.
Mhm.
Like they have popcorn movies, which are movies that aren't
Just are
necessarily-
fun.
Yeah, they're fun. My books and my writing tends to be fun. I want to entertain you. However, while I'm entertaining you, I like you to learn a little something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll throw in some history, I talk about Alexander the Great or the Templars or some cool historical fact. But then I also like to insert isms so that maybe you think, sexism is bad or, misogyny is bad or, kind of numerous things like that. So I will throw those kinds of things, touch on that. And, as I said, I'm writing for kids, so it's probably less hard-hitting than a lot of novels out there are. Probably a little bit more glossy version.
Although that's probably publishing now, because, like, Bridge to Terabithia was something.
Oh my, that book still scars me to this day.
Yeah.
What is
Like,
this
there is
book?
some
Bridge
shit
to
in
Bridge
that
to
Terabithia.
story.
Terabithia.
There is some shit
It's-
in that story they would not publish now.
No, yeah, that's so true.
So-
And to be
Dirty
honest, I'm not holding back. Like, I don't want to think I'm not like washing over things. It's
Okay.
there.
Oh, just
Yeah.
just so you know, Bridge to Terabithia is a good novel, but let's just say it is a tragedy.
It does not pull
Okay.
punches.
Don't tell me any more about it. 'Cause I haven't
There
read
was a wonderful Disney movie
Yes,
starring
there
young John Hutcherson.
Okay. I think Anna Sophia Robb's the other one.
Yeah, I don't know.
I am not going to watch it.
It's everything that you think it is.
But it's a wonderful book. I probably read it like 4 or 5 times as a
It's
kid.
wonderful. If
If you like to cry,
Yeah.
I reread books, I wouldn't reread it because I have certain rules about what I'm allowed to read, but
Yeah.
still it would be good enough to reread.
But you're right. And see now, I will admit that the Iron Horseman in there, it's steampunk Victorian adventure novels. So they're for fun, they're meant to be fun. They're meant to be kind of rousing adventures. However, I do like to insert a little bit of thinking time in there, a little bit of dark moods. The third one has, some real kind of hard-hitting stuff. Did that on purpose because the characters are more mature and my readers are hopefully a little bit more mature. But yeah, like the middle grade I'm writing right now has some, more hard-hitting type stuff in it. And yet, at the same time, some more lighthearted and fun stuff.
Just real quick, I'm going to say, Brad, you brought up something that it's not a demon of mine, but something I fear with my writing is I'm glossing over too much.
Yeah.
That I'm pulling back away because of the pain that's underneath it. And that there's certain pain which I can share the pain, I can't share the story of what caused that pain, which is another reason why I don't journal.
Well, one of my critique partners actually had to go to therapy because of the novel that she wrote. So you can't dump too much of yourself into a book.
Yeah.
But I think also when you do that, you're writing a really good book.
True. Kathleen?
I had a couple things. Something that I struggle with as a writer is, I guess, pulling my punches, not making things hard enough for main characters to deal with. Like, I mentioned demons before, and how it shocks your brain back into lizard, and you're just, everything is terror, and it's hard to think. Well, when your frontal lobe shut down, of course it's hard to think. But, it's just science. But I realized in writing demonic characters, I haven't made them bad enough. Like, they're not evil enough. They do not inspire that kind of fear that they need to. Because I don't like going to such a dark place. That's not something that is good for the story. It's something that is good for me, but I need to knock it off. So something that I'm going to have to deal with in the rewrite is making these beings truly wrong in all the ways. And that's going to make it a lot more difficult on my main characters later. Like, she gonna need therapy. Just a little bit. She gonna need some therapy. And it's something that's hard for me to deal with, knowing some of the things I'm going to have happen to her now as a writer. Like, it goes against my moral principles.
You're making your fictional character suffer too much.
No, not enough.
Well, that's not what I mean. You're feeling guilty about making your fictional character suffer.
Yeah, but part of me is also like, if I put this thing into the world, I'm responsible for some of the things that it creates. Like Stephen King, when he wrote, I think the book is Rage, and he wanted it to be published. It's about a school shooting before we had them all the time. And he put it into the world, and he regrets it to this day. Because
do you feel somewhat responsible for people thinking of doing that?
He doesn't feel responsible. There's a sense of,
if you put the idea out there and normalize it just enough, somebody's going to do it.
Exactly.
He's afraid that every person who decides that a school shooting is how they're going to send their message is doing that because the thought wouldn't have entered their head without him writing it at some point.
And then it entering someone's head who did it, and then that spiraling out. Like, once the idea, you can't stop the signal.
On some level, we are responsible for the, for what we put in our novels. I think the true art that you learn, though, and this is where I can honestly say I went from being somebody who wanted to write to a true writer, is knowing that you had to put that in there, that you can't hold back, that you have to push it into the dark place, that you have to go there. And why? Because anyone can write a glossy story. Anyone can write fluff. The true art that writers really do is to shine the light somewhere, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the darkest corner. It can just be some avenue that most people aren't going to think of, but finding that area to shine light on that no one's looking at, that's where the true art of writing kind of really comes out.
That's interesting. It's getting me to think about a character that I'm trying to write. He's the bad guy. And I think part of the reason is he's supposed to be somewhat sympathetic, but still the bad guy, and trying to figure out how to do that is tough.
And a way to do that is tune in next to our previous week's episode about writing bad guys and sleazy protagonists.
And on a related note to that, there's a book that I still need to read that's going to be tough to read. It's Arslan, Arslan, by M.J. Ing. It's about a dictator who sets up shop starting in a little school in Illinois. He starts off the book and you hate him because he does a reprehensible thing. But you start rooting for him as the book progresses, and that's something you have to deal with as a reader. Brad,
Yeah.
to your point, one of the things that I love about sci-fi and fantasy as genres is that it often does shine a light in dark places, and it does it slant. Emily Dickinson said, "Tell all the truth, but tell it slant," and these genres are great at it. So you don't necessarily know you're learning about an ism, for example, but you're feeling for these people who are the other from your main character, and that helps you empathize with people who are the other to you in your life in ways you may not realize.
I completely agree.
A common theme, and back again even further, common things we deal with in our writing, common themes. I've found out through reading through my stuff that I deal a lot with what people believe is true versus what is true and what is a lie. So, spoiler alert, everyone, I hate being lied to. If I ask you a question, it's because I want the answer, and I don't care if I like the answer. I ask the freaking question. A little bit of a pet peeve when people tell me stuff like that. So, my characters will think something is true, and somewhere along the line, someone has lied to them. And they will believe that lie is true wholeheartedly and do their best to be good people and do good things, but they're doing it in service of a lie. And it's because they trust the wrong people. And I love doing that. I love doing it so much. Like, in the story I'm writing right now, half the book, you think something, you believe a lie because that's what the main characters believe, because that's what they've been told by people they trust. And you're only finding out the truth in increments. So they're still wrong about some things, and that's fun.
To that point, one of the things that I hate in life and in stories and other things like that is things that are unfair. Characters who get treated unfairly. You know, I used to scream out at movies when I was a kid that was unfair, and you know, stuff like that. I get super upset, and to this day I still can't stand it. However, I will fully admit that I go there as a writer and will write an unfair situation simply because I know that it does exist in life. This is something that happens. You know, it's kind of shining a light on how to deal with that sense of unfairness, you know, and stuff like that. But yeah, I you know, kind of taking some of those things that we personally can't stand, and pulling them in. That's where you're shining a light on something. That's where you're aiming that light of being a writer on something. But yeah, I hate unfairness. It sucks.
My current work I'm working on, which is a very long audio play, comes out of two things that I've got demons in there that I'm dealing with. And the original story was Dark Medicine, which some of us who sitting around the table may remember me reading at various open mics. And that one, that was a vampire. I've changed that character around. The original vampire was my dad's leukemia. That was that dealing with that. The other, there's a character in there that's not, it's normal, she's normal human, but she's based, very, very loosely, but she's based on a relationship I was in. That was it. I hate abusers of any kind, shape, form. I have a female cousin who will tell you that her ex, who actually hit her, they lived across the state, and he heard I was on my way once I learned about this, and he had me yet several years later to return to the state because he knows something scary will happen. But I ended up in a relationship with somebody who was very manipulative, and that took years to get over. And that relationship, not that person, but that relationship's in that story as well. And I've found myself, as I'm rewriting it now, the vampire's a different type of character altogether, or creature altogether. That those two storylines are still very strong in that story.
Has anybody had the experience where you have something that you're dealing with. Like you have a person, for example, that did something that just, it hurt you deeply. And you weave that into a story, that situation, and then you find yourself being sympathetic to the person that you cannot stand because of what they did, because you're beginning to see reasons why it could have happened. Like you find yourself sympathizing with the character that you've created, even if the person that like did the actual thing is still dead to you.
I don't know if I find myself sympathetic to them, but I do find myself understanding
Yeah.
more of their mind, of the possibility of what their mindset could have been. And there's a line somewhere in that I haven't crossed over to be sympathizing or with that person. You know what I'm saying? I understand it, but I don't. Maybe that's me growing as a writer still. I need to go.
Something that in the writing for therapy part of this discussion, something that helped me was a mixture of journaling and doing what Brad does, thinking about things from all the sides, all the angles for a while, was going through a conversation that had happened either conveniently through text or like in your memory, if your memory is better.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to figure out where everyone was coming from. Like, I said that I write about what people believe is true versus, the actual truth. And I went through a conversation and I thought through what was said. So the fact, what was said, what the idea behind it was, like what they actually meant, because people don't say what they mean. That's something that you might want to take note of if you're writing characters speaking. We don't say what we mean all the time. We go around things. Mm-hmm. We're just terrible. So what was said, what was meant, and what was desired from all of that, and where they were coming from. Doing that was so helpful for me. Like, it was like I had been at therapy for an hour, or like had EMDR done, actually. EMDR is a kind of therapy that keeps your frontal lobes active instead of sending you to lizard brain, so you can actually process a traumatic experience, where trauma is any experience your brain isn't prepared to handle, which then sends it to lizard brain to deal with. Mm-hmm. So that was immensely helpful for me, and that also allowed me to look at my characters in a new way. Like, when they're talking now, I see what they're saying, and I know what they mean, and I understand where they're coming from. And so this thing that helped me in a real relationship, understanding a different person, I still disagree with them, but I get it, where they're coming from. It also helped me in my writing, and writing different characters. And then the room was dead.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I've said dead like 5 times during this recording too. I'm so sorry, everyone.
I think you just dropped the mic. That was a purpose.
Boom!
Well, again,
To lighten the mood real quick, I'd also throw out that some of the demons you'll find in your writing also will be, words that you repeat, themes that you overly repeat, some fun stuff like that is not necessarily coming from some deep psychological place, but probably faulty English teachers or not paying enough attention in literature class or, stuff like that. So just know that those are some demons that you'll probably have to face too.
The word that's
a good one. Just.
I can tell you a lot of my characters are biracial from multicultural households. I'm just like, biracial people represent. Why is everybody not white, Kathleen? Because not everyone is white. Some of us are just half.
I try really hard not to write only white people.
That's good. We need diverse books.
Yeah,
That's a
right,
hashtag, by the by.
That's also another episode.
Yeah.
yes.
So, we have learned today
About each other.
We've
I
all
feel like
shared.
doing a Barney summary. Like, here's what we've learned today. We've learned that writing can be therapeutic. We've learned that journaling can help you access memories that you may otherwise lose. We have learned that we all have things that we write about more often than not, and that whether or not we're still dealing with those issues, they can help fuel our writing. We've learned that words like that and he
about-
exclaimed instead of using he said can be problems that are just as demonic and haunting
Yes.
as the issues that we face in our hearts.
I would also
That's
say
not-
though, it's also okay to go to those dark places or to
Yes.
pull upon these moments from your life.
Yeah.
Know that that is okay. Know that you've suffered, you've gone through something, and it's for reasons. Probably a ton of other reasons that are more important to you, but it's okay for some of those reasons to be great fodder for future writing.
My final words are that every person in this room and every person in the whole world is living a unique experience.
Yes.
Okay.
The same thing doesn't happen to every single person, and that in that way you are looking at writing from your own perspective. What you bring to the table is going to be new and maybe educational to someone else who hasn't had that same hasn't lived that same life as you. So don't be afraid to write your demons, because your demons are what make you a unique and individual and talented, special, well-rounded person.
And I think on that note, I'm going to go ahead and kill this episode.
Please
I am
share
gonna
your
drop my-
demons in the comments section below.
Yes. And everybody have a great week writing. Tune in next week for yet another interesting story in the writing industry.
Don't ask me for my therapist.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information.
The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.